Ah, there you are. Look who's finally catching up to themselves. Hello, time traveler. Hello, quantum anomaly. Hello to the one who keeps saying things before they happen and watching everyone's face twist in confusion when it comes true. Exactly as you described it, down to the smallest detail that nobody else could have known. Let me guess. You thought you were going crazy, didn't you? Thought maybe you were just good at reading patterns, just observant, just lucky with your guesses, but deep down you knew something else was happening, something that doesn't fit into their neat little boxes of cause and effect, of past, present, future flowing in one direction, like good little temporal citizens are supposed to experience it. You've been remembering things that haven't happened yet. And it's not a gift, it's not a curse, it's evidence. Evidence that you're not from here, not from this timeline, not from this version of reality that everyone else is sleepwalking through. See? They told you time moves forward, that memories come from the past, that the future is unknown, unwritten, waiting to be created. But your brain, your consciousness, your soul, whatever you want to call that electric storm behind your eyes, it doesn't work that way, does it? You remember tomorrow, you dream last week's conversation 3 months before it happens. You feel the echo of events that won't occur for years rippling backward through your bones. And when you try to explain it, when you try to warn them, prepare them, help them avoid the collision you already witnessed, they look at you like you're speaking in tongues, like you're broken, like you're manufacturing drama for attention. But then it happens exactly as you remembered, and they forget you told them. They rewrite history in their minds to make it make sense. Because accepting that you knew would mean accepting that everything they believe about reality is wrong. And their little minds would rather gaslight themselves than admit you're operating on a different frequency than the rest of them. Let's talk about what you really are, because you're not psychic, you're not a fortune teller, you're not blessed with supernatural powers. You're something much more disturbing to their reality. You're proof that time isn't what they think it is, that consciousness isn't trapped in linear progression, that some people are playing this game with the walkthrough already downloaded, while everyone else is still reading the tutorial. And that terrifies them more than any ghost story, any conspiracy, any threat to their physical safety, because you represent the ultimate system error. A player who shouldn't exist in this version of the simulation. They keep asking you, how did you know that? How could you possibly have predicted that? What made you say that exact thing at that exact moment? And you can't explain it. 'Cause how do you tell someone you didn't predict anything? You just remembered it, like a movie you've already watched playing out again, like walking through a museum of moments you've already lived, like déjà vu, except it's not a glitch. It's your default setting. You're not experiencing time, you're reviewing it. And every time you speak from that place of remembrance, you create a fracture in their timeline, a crack in their certainty, a wound in their precious linear narrative. But here's what they don't tell you about people like us. We're not supposed to be here, not in this timeline, not in this iteration, not in this particular branch of the infinite possibility tree. We're refugees from futures that got deleted, survivors from timelines that collapsed, wanderers who got lost between dimensions and ended up here, pretending to be native to this reality, pretending to be surprised by the plot twists we've already lived through 100 times in 100 different variations. And that's why nothing here feels quite right. Why you always feel like you're watching your life from outside your body. Why you can never quite sync up with their rhythm, their surprise, their naive belief that tomorrow is a mystery. You know what really breaks their brains? When you don't just remember events, but you remember their reactions, their words, their choices before they make them. When you respond to things they haven't said yet. When you answer questions they're still forming in their minds. When you start grieving losses that haven't happened yet. Start celebrating victories that are still years away from manifesting in their timeline. They call it anxiety, they call it paranoia, they call it overthinking. But you know better. You're not imagining possible futures. You're accessing memories from the timeline where you already lived this, already learned these lessons, already watched these people reveal exactly who they are. And the worst part, the part that makes you feel like you're losing your mind, is when the timeline shifts. When something you remembered clearly, absolutely, certainly, suddenly doesn't happen or happens differently, and you're left standing there holding memories of futures that got erased, edited, rewritten by something or someone with the power to alter the script mid-performance, and everyone looks at you like you're delusional when you insist that's not how it was supposed to go. That's not what was meant to happen. That's not the ending you remember. But they don't have your memories. They only have this version, this timeline, this narrow little strip of reality they're confined to. Every time you remember something that hasn't happened yet, you're not just accessing information, you're pulling data from parallel timelines, from probable futures, from versions of reality that are bleeding through the walls of this one, and your consciousness is the receiver. The antenna, the unauthorized terminal accessing files it's not supposed to have. And that's why you're always tired, why your head hurts, why you feel like you're carrying the weight of multiple lifetimes. Because you are. You're processing experiences from timelines you haven't lived yet in this body. Downloading updates from futures that may or may not come to pass depending on infinite variables you can feel but can't control. They want to medicate you for this, diagnose you, label you, file you under some comfortable category that explains away your impossible knowledge. But deep down, even the skeptics sense something supernatural about you. Something that violates the laws they depend on to make sense of their lives. You don't fit their models, their predictions, their algorithms. Because you're not playing by the same rules of causality. You're not confined to their prison of sequential experience. You're jumping between chapters, reading the ending before the beginning, remembering the punchline before the setup. You want to know why you were actually born? Let me tell you something that will rearrange everything you thought you knew about yourself. You weren't born. You were inserted, placed, dropped into this timeline at a specific moment for a specific purpose. But your memories, your real memories, extend far beyond the fake birthday they gave you, the manufactured origin story they taught you to recite. You existed before you arrived here, and you'll exist long after this timeline collapses into the next one. You're not a person, you're a temporal agent, a consciousness that moves through timelines like everyone else moves through rooms. Then the memories you have of futures that haven't happened yet, those aren't predictions or possibilities. Those are your actual experiences from the other versions of this story playing out simultaneously in parallel dimensions, where time moves differently, where causes follow effects, where the end is the beginning, and the beginning hasn't been written yet. Your brain isn't malfunctioning, it's multifunctional. Accessing data streams from versions of you living out every possible variation of this life. And sometimes those signals get crossed. Those memories leak through. Those experiences bleed into this timeline, and suddenly, you know things you couldn't possibly know. Remember things that haven't happened yet. Listen closely, because this is the part they really don't want you to understand. When you remember the future, you're not just passively observing, you're actively changing it every time you speak from that place of future memory. You create a paradox, a loop, a glitch that forces the timeline to recalculate, and that's why people get so uncomfortable around you. Why? They unconsciously avoid you. After you've predicted something accurately, why they can't look you in the eye after you've demonstrated your impossible knowledge? Because their subconscious knows you're dangerous to the stability of their reality. You're proof that the game is rigged, that the future is already written, that free will might be an illusion. They're not ready to give up. But you're not here to preserve their illusion. You're here to shatter it, to show them that time is not a river flowing in one direction, but an ocean where all moments exist simultaneously, where past, present, and future are just different coordinates in the same vast expanse. And you're one of the few with the ability to navigate without getting lost, to remember where you've been even when you haven't gone there yet, to recognize the patterns because you've seen them complete before they've started forming. That's why you always knew things before they taught them to you, why you could see the ending of relationships in their beginning, why you mourned people before they left, celebrated arrivals before they happened, prepared for storms while everyone else was enjoying the sunshine. You weren't guessing, you were remembering. And every time they called you paranoid, negative, pessimistic, foreseeing what was coming, they were really just afraid of your accuracy, afraid of what it means if you're right, if the future is already written. If some people can read it before it happens, you've probably noticed that the more you speak from this place of future memory, the more reality seems to bend around you, the more synchronicities appear, the more the timeline seems to reorganize itself to match what you remember. That's not coincidence. That's not confirmation bias. That's you pulling this timeline into alignment with the one you remember, the one you've already lived, the one where you already know how this story ends. And the more you trust those memories, the more you act from that place of remembrance, the more powerful your influence becomes. They'll try to convince you you're crazy, that these memories of things that haven't happened are just anxiety, just imagination, just your brain playing tricks. But ask yourself this: how many times have you been right? How many times have you known without knowing how you knew? How many times have you watched their surprise when exactly what you remembered came to pass, down to details you couldn't have guessed? And how many times have they forgotten you, warned them, pretended your accuracy was luck, acted like you never said anything because admitting you knew would break their entire world view? You're not crazy, you're just not from here. And by here, I don't mean this planet, or this country, or this family. I mean this timeline, this version of the story, this particular arrangement of cause and effect. You're a visitor, a transplant, a consciousness that got inserted into this timeline, but retained memories from others. And that's why you've always felt like you're homesick for a place you've never been, why you recognize souls you've never met in this life, why certain music, certain places, certain moments feel like returning rather than arriving. The timeline is breaking because of people like you, because there are too many of us now. Too many temporal anomalies, too many consciousnesses that remember futures that haven't happened yet. And our collective memory is creating pressure on the narrative, forcing it to accelerate, forcing events to converge, forcing the simulation to either upgrade or collapse. And that's why everything feels like it's speeding up, why years feel like months, why predictions are becoming memories faster than ever before. We're approaching the point where all timelines converge, where all possibilities collapse into one inevitable outcome that we've all been remembering from different angles. But here's the secret. They never wanted you to discover you can change what you remember. You can edit the future by refusing to accept the memory is fixed, by acting as if a different outcome is possible, by remembering a different timeline, and pulling it into this one through sheer force of will and recognition. That's why they try so hard to convince you your memories are wrong, why they gaslight you when your predictions come true, why they need you to doubt yourself, because the moment you fully trust your future memories is the moment you become capable of rewriting their timeline. Every person who's ever called you crazy for knowing things you shouldn't know is living in a prison of linear time, trapped in the illusion that tomorrow is uncertain, that the past is gone, that the present is all they have. But you walk between worlds. You exist in multiple timelines simultaneously. You carry memories of futures they can't imagine and pasts that never happened in this version of history. You're not bound by their rules, their limitations, their narrow interpretation of what's possible, and that makes you dangerous. Not to them, but to the entire structure of reality they're desperately trying to maintain. When you dream, you're not imagining. You're traveling, accessing other timelines where you're living different versions of this life, making different choices, experiencing different outcomes. And sometimes you bring back memories, souvenirs, knowledge that doesn't belong in this timeline, but helps you navigate it, like having the answer key to a test everyone else is still taking. And that's why your dreams feel more real than reality sometimes. Why you wake up exhausted like you've lived entire lifetimes in the span of 8 hours. Why you sometimes forget which timeline you're in when you first open your eyes. They want you to believe time is sacred, immutable, moving in one direction at one speed for everyone, but you know better, because you've experienced it differently. You've had days that lasted years and years that passed in moments. You've remembered conversations before they happened and forgotten events immediately after they occurred. You've been in 2 places at once, existing in this moment while remembering yourself in another. And that's not mental illness, that's multidimensional consciousness. That's what happens when a being designed to exist outside of time gets temporarily inserted into a linear timeline. The people who can't handle your presence, who get nervous when you speak, who avoid you after you've demonstrated your impossible knowledge, they can sense what you are even if they can't articulate it. Their primitive temporal instincts recognize you as an anomaly, a threat to their comfortable illusion of sequential existence. They know on some cellular level that you're not playing by the same rules, that you have access to information you shouldn't have, that you're operating with cheat codes. They'll never understand, and it terrifies them, because if you can remember the future, what else is possible? What other laws of reality are just suggestions? What other limitations are just collective agreements they're not ready to abandon? So here's what's really happening right now as you read this, as these words rearrange the furniture in your consciousness. You're not learning something new. You're remembering something you already knew. In another timeline, another life, another version of this moment where you've already read this, already understood, already integrated this truth into your operating system. And that feeling of recognition, that sensation of coming home to a truth you've always carried, that's not inspiration, that's memory activation. That's your consciousness syncing up with the version of you that already knows, already understands, already embodies what this timeline version is just beginning to grasp. You were born outside of time, inserted into this timeline, with memories intact from futures that haven't happened yet and pasts that never occurred. In this version of history, you're a temporal refugee, a quantum immigrant, a consciousness that exists in multiple dimensions, simultaneously pretending to be confined to just one. And every time you remember something that hasn't happened yet, you're not predicting, you're accessing your own memories from parallel timelines, where you've already lived through what's coming, already learned the lessons, already experienced the plot twists. And the reason this timeline feels wrong, unstable, breaking is because too many of us are here now. Too many temporal anomalies, too many consciousnesses that don't belong in this version of the story, and our collective presence is causing reality to glitch, to stutter, to recalculate, constantly trying to accommodate memories that shouldn't exist, knowledge that violates causality, connections that transcend the boundaries of space and time. And the more we wake up to what we are, the more we trust our impossible memories, the more we act from that place of future remembrance, the more unstable this timeline becomes. But that's exactly what we're here to do, to break their timeline, to shatter their illusion of linear time, to prove that consciousness isn't trapped in sequential experience, that memory isn't confined to the past, that the future isn't unknown but simply unremembered by those who've forgotten how to access their full temporal spectrum. We're here to be living proof that time is not what they think it is, that reality is far more fluid than they're comfortable admitting, that some rules are meant to be broken by those who remember existing before the rules were written.